Hello, everyone. Welcome to Broker's Playbook. I'm here with my co-host, Simeon Papayelios. I am Laura Martin, and we are joined today by this esteemed president of the Toronto Regional Real Estate Board, Lisa Patel, with her CEO, John DiMichele. Thank you both for joining us today. We've got lots of questions. Of course, the hot button one is, what's up with the market?
Welcome, guys.
Yeah.
Welcome, guys.
Everyone's favorite topic.
You're in the hot seat today, boy. You're in the hot seat today.
You know what? It's a great question. So it's the one that probably every realtor receives everywhere they go is what's happening in the real estate market. And I'll tell you, before the just as COVID had taken place in 2020, what we witnessed is in the early months between March and April, we had a shutdown. And of course, going into 2020, and John will speak more on this, we already had a pent-up demand in the marketplace. So as we moved through COVID and shifted and pivoted, and of course, going into more of the spring and summer months, what we witnessed was the pent-up demand come out even stronger. It was resilient. And in fact, we witnessed, 4 record-breaking months. and
Unbelievable growth.
Yes. And even though, some people talk about the condo market and the rental market, and I know, Simeon, you've spoken about this. I've read some of your newspaper clippings on this. And I still strongly believe that as we move forward through COVID and through the end of 2020 into 2021, that what we're going to see is the same challenges that we walked into 2020 with. And that's a supply issue. And John, do you want to touch more on that?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having us, guys.
Our pleasure and our honor to have you, John. Thank you.
Thank you. To add to what Lisa was saying, we have an atmosphere right now that is trying to absorb that pent-up demand that's still there. But there's also other factors. And we're trying to figure out what that is. Is it the fact that money is relatively inexpensive right now to borrow? What is it that's motivating people to buy homes? At such a rate, and not just in Toronto, but basically in North America? It's happening everywhere.
Yes.
So when we're trying to explain it or try to understand it, there probably was that period of time in our world when the Fair Housing bill came in, the act came in, and it really kind of shut real estate down. We all experienced that in 2018. But what we didn't notice at that time was, even though it appeared that the market was slowing down in the GTA, it really wasn't for realtors because they were doing business outside of our reporting area. And that has now, we looked at 2018 as being, one of the 4th worst years in history. And yet when we do all transactions all throughout the Ontario, it was actually the 4th best. So you have to look at it how the market is actually working. One of the interesting things I hear people saying, 60,000 agents only doing 80,000 deals, nobody's making money. But when you look at the actual transactions, about 184,000, including leases, commercial, and everything else like that. So it's interesting. Doesn't even factor in the new homes. So now let's fast forward to today. Here we are. We're getting, I've been saying that I believed with the inventory coming in that we were going to head into more of a balanced marketplace. But that really is underpinned by the fact that we don't have immigration right now. No immigration, and no even temporary immigrants for guys that are going to school. People are here for work or whatever, because they can't come in across the border. So imagine what things are going to be like, considering this federal government has said they're 400,000 a year. Wow. So if the numbers are always consistent, then we should expect serious immigration and migration to the GTA and the Greater Golden Horseshoe. So my analogy is always this: once things get back to some semblance of normal, it's going to be like a Mentos tab and a Pepsi bottle, right? So, but we're also seeing another effect. Sorry, Simeon, just quickly, is the condo market is, we had the Airbnb issue, now a lot more inventory coming into the market. Rents are starting to go down. That impact, because you still have the students having to rent, or the people coming into the city that needed to rent, immigration as well. because they always rent first, then potentially, and then they go and buy. So those impacts are being felt, but there's other factors. So I see this as maybe a balanced market for a period of time, but once things open up, we might get right back where we were.
And I also think too, John, to add to that, that's probably one area that we're just going to have to watch for it too. I mean, the Ford government said, no rent increases going into 2021, right? And then of course, knowing that rentals have dropped so much significantly in some areas more than others, what will that mean for landlords and tenants as we go into 2022, right? So there's still going to be, I think there's going to be lots of opportunity for lobbying. Like if we look at 2020, it was really a year where we spent a lot of time also working with government on so many issues.
No doubt.
And continue to, yes.
I have quite a bit of comments actually, because you covered a lot of ground. But I think the major component of my thoughts, because I agree with absolutely everything you presented. Not to say that I typically agree with anyone or anything, quite the contrary. But the truth of the matter here is a lot of people confuse a health crisis with a housing crisis. COVID-19 and its effects are a completely artificial event, a physical event that's been placed inside our economy, and we have to live within the effects and the consequences of it wreaking the havoc that it has. The minute a vaccine comes through, or the flu season passes, or whatever the case may result in this thing resolving itself, because it will, it has no choice but to, one way or another, whether it's going to pester us for 6 months, threaten our economy for another year, whatever the case may be, it's serious, but it does have an end date. It's not forever, period. That we know.
Yeah, and I mean, the bond markets are already reflecting that, right? Like the economy.
Clearly, but where I'm going with this is real estate has been always and will always be a long-term play. It is a tool and a vehicle used to create wealth. It is a tool and a vehicle to live your life, to live your best life, to create your family, to create the comfort and the nest that every human being longs for. So for as long as human beings need shelter, for as long as businesses need bricks and mortar, real estate will always be around. So we have to remind ourselves to not think in an emotional, we're in the business, like we're not the buyer and the seller, we're the agent. You're not the top slice or the bottom slice of the sandwich, you're the ham in the sandwich. And I've said this a million times.
I like to call it more the connector. You're the one that creates that story to making it happen.
100%. So you having the calmness as a realtor, as a mortgage broker, because nothing changes. Our industries are intertwined like this. So for us to have the long game look, for us to respect the present and the issues, but know that up to January or February, we were on track to have the highest year ever in recorded TREB history.
45%. We were on a 45% incline month over month until this was shut down.
Month over month. So what does that mean though? That means that the dynamics of the housing market, which means our undersupply based on immigration, students, this, that, and the other, those things haven't been addressed by COVID. So the minute COVID goes away, here we go.
Yeah.
The music's blaring, you got to start dancing.
Well, we're going to have to think about how we do that. Like Lisa said, it's going to be, careful. And the government's going to have to think about it as well, because you don't want another situation like we did before when you've got 50 multiples, that sort of a scenario, although that's not a bad thing, but it is bad for the buyers who are trying to get in without supply. So the good news is that both the city of Toronto and the province have committed to creating more supply. And the thing about vacancy tax, and there's evidence, some evidence there, trying to get hard evidence ourselves, You know, Lisa always bugs me that I'm evidence-based decision-making. That's my mantra.
That's fine.
And-
Just so you know.
Oh, you darn you, evidence.
So, but anecdotally, I'm hearing stories like this, that you've got, you know, certain organizations that may own multiple apartments that aren't all putting them all onto the market because it would be a flood. So if that's true, if some of those things are happening, then we're sort of holding back supply. And I can see why the city, if that's what they're talking about, that's why they're probably looking at, look, if you're artificially keeping back supply, it's a problem. So that's why they're looking at vacancy tax, but we want to see evidence on that. And I know anecdotally, I've heard a little bit about that. But you're right. I mean, I think the real issue here is this people liken it to, again, here I go, sorry. But after World War II, we had the baby boom. Are we expecting a baby boom after this event? You know, did you had a lot of different economic events happen after the Second World War. We all feel like we're restricted and constricted by this invisible enemy, right? So what happens when it's back on track? I'll ask you, you know, what can we anticipate? Probably a lot of activity.
Well, that's what I anticipate. I do want to give the mic to Lisa Patel. Lisa, because I want to move. I know Laura Martin has been waiting a long time to ask the question about the education reform in OREA, in TREB, in how that whole process goes. But I have just one last question for you. What do you advise your brothers and sisters in real estate to do today? Is it a message of patience? Is it what do you, as the president of TREB and a practicing broker, a successful practicing broker, what is your advice to your brothers and sisters today?
Well, if I ask John, his response to me will be energy, because he knows that I talk about energy every single day. But you know what, truthfully, I say, like, you know what, plan, prepare yourselves. And you know, if there's, you know, this year was an opportunity to really evaluate ourselves and evaluate where we are in our business and what does that look like, and what is that going to look like in the future. So if we're going to know, knowing that we're going into 2021 and that we're right here. So what have we done lead up to that? So not only is it just a shift of mindset, but keeping a healthy mindset is number one. Number two, we're still in COVID. So yes, please practice COVID health and safety matters. Whatever is written out there, please visit TREBS, visit Stratus, log in, make sure that you're following all of those health guidelines.
And staying up to date to those, because they're changing ever so often.
And we're trying our best to really communicate as soon as it comes out in ways that will make sense for everyone. And I will tell you honestly, I get messages all the time from different areas saying, does that mean that we can't do open houses? So, you know, and you know, if anything, 2020 also taught us it was pivot. And you probably know this better than anyone else, is even pivot the way that we do business and how we do business. So, you know what, I would say, continue to educate yourself, continue to learn more, continue to pay attention to shows like this one, right? Where you're actually gaining value that you can take back and say, okay, or, you know, ask people. Yeah, I think those are very important things as we move forward and prepare yourself. So business planning time, right? I mean, Simeon, do you already have your business plan ready?
I can tell you that my business plan is ready, and I'm actually on Wednesday of next week. I'm launching the business planning sessions with 40. My team is up to 40 agents now, which I can't believe.
That deserves a clap. There you
go. Without further ado, thank you, Lisa. I appreciate your advice to our industry and to our brothers and sisters. Laura, I know you wanted to really cover off education reform, the changes with John. Go ahead, my dear.
Yeah, so in terms of the road to real estate, I know that it's been a very accessible industry, as has mortgage brokering. You know, it's the great equalizer. I know a lot of people with, you know, fairly limited education. For instance, my mother was an immigrant from Jamaica, and she was able to enter the real estate industry under TREB about 40 years ago. My goodness. Yeah. So I'll definitely be taking a selfie with her for the Trev 100 because it's a
Great.
big deal. Both my parents are in real estate, but you know, there's been a bit of a stigma that the real estate industry has had to shake, that, you know, there's people with nefarious purposes, that there's, you know, this macho sales sort of element, and that it doesn't require a lot of thoughtfulness or technical ability, which of course it does. It is the largest sale to make, really. And it's very complicated. So I think it's really great, first of all, that you have tightened the restrictions, that it's become a career that people choose as opposed to fall back upon. And I was wondering if you could just clarify what it takes to now be a real estate agent, how that works for people, because a lot of people are thinking about changing careers post-COVID, of course. And also what perhaps the mortgage industry could take away from your decisions, because to become a mortgage agent, it's only about a week in Ontario to do that course. So yeah, if you could fill us in on what's new, why you've done that, and then what the mortgage industry could take away from that.
Thanks, Laura. Just to be clear, this is not something that we could affect by our decisions, but we lobbied for years, and Simeon knows this. I was a realtor involved for 12 years. Half of that time I was selling, and the other half I was managing rather large offices, and as a broker myself. And I learned a lot at the Perch, but I learned a lot along the way. Even when I first started, you'd have to take a series of courses. It took months to get it done. But the most important thing that we started to see that started tipping the scale for us was there were a lot of people coming into the industry who had no clue, unfortunately. Brokers would call us, I got some direct calls that were rather shocking, the questions they asked me, and they weren't getting really the education that they needed. They didn't know how to even construct an offer. They had no idea of certain things. So we started really scratching at the surface years ago. And we lobbied to get all those learning aids out of people. You know, why do you have to have all these kind of shortcut type products that are sold to help you get your license? And we see them all over the place. So it's really good that now, well, let me put it this way. We had to create a course here at TREB that is a mandatory course now that's called Trading Essentials. And so people actually can go out there and know what they're doing, because it wasn't happening out of
so because the onboarding was very much left up to the brokerage they joined, correct?
Well, yeah, well, yes. So what was happening is they come out of the AREA system and really not understand basics. So we took it upon ourselves. And so you're right. And then from a broker standpoint, they would have that. A lot of brokers are incredibly well organized. They do a fantastic job of getting their people ready to go. And then they teach them also something that we don't really venture into, which is the sales training aspect of it. But from our standpoint, we just wanted to make sure that the professionals coming in were actually professional, understand the basics of the law, and creating an agreement and taking someone through the transaction. As you said earlier, Laura, think about it. The biggest transaction and the biggest debt load that people take on in their lives, not just the 100%. Transaction. And I always tell everybody, look, we are in the shelter business, right? You need 4 things in life: air, water, food, shelter. Air is free. You can get it pretty much anywhere unless you're living underground. Water you have to find. Food you have to hunt or forage for. But even if you have those other 3 things, you need shelter, right? You still need shelter. We're in the shelter business, and we're taking people's lives. We affect their lives significant. You folks do. So I see it as essential. So I took the opportunity to go to Humber and meet with Miguel, myself, Lamero. He was in charge of putting the thing together, and I saw what they're doing there. I was incredibly impressed. They are actually, when people are leaving that particular system, and yes, it takes a long time, and yes, there's practical teaching.
So what does that look like, John?
Yeah.
So they take some courses are online, but then they have to take 2 full weeks of actual practical. If you pass the other courses, the practical aspect of learning the true aspects of being a realtor, a professional, if you fail there, you have to start again. And that's the real.
And Laura, just to John's note, and the thinking about the mortgage industry, just because of my background of coming from the mortgage industry into the real estate, I think that's the biggest thing that's missing, right? When you think about the mortgage industry, right? Is that practical? Unless you actually came from a bank or institution,
That's right.
an actual institution, you don't get that actual training that you would need to go on to the streets and actually help somebody with the biggest transaction of their life.
So to that, Lisa, my question is this: like when I did the course, and this is going back exactly 14 years, okay? It was a 3-part series. I'm really aging myself. It was a 3-part course that I studied for. And basically I came out, I joined my first brokerage. I was very fortunate to meet some incredible mentors. And basically all I realized is I knew just enough to not get sued. And this isn't speaking badly about it, because it doesn't matter. What matters is the reality. So the reality of it is, up until now, and this is not the first time, I'm not the only one that felt this. You were covering ground to make sure that you know how to write an APS without getting sued, not how to best service the client.
You know, and I agree with you to the extent that, like, every situation was so different. Like, you and I probably share the same amount of years in this industry together. And when I look back at our younger selves, and some of the transactions that you said, oh my gosh, or like the rules that you were never really fully educated in, because at the end of the day, you went into this thinking, okay, I'm going to create a business. And then you're only focused on putting bread on the table. So there's still so many other things that we should have learned in that process, and that we had to learn sometimes in the hard way.
John, this is for you. And I think the biggest issue with real estate, in education in real estate, lies in the fact that real estate is such a massive spectrum. So if you want to talk real estate, you can talk from land banking to land development to new construction to resale to leasing to industrial to government to institutional to anything that the eye sees when you leave your front door is real estate, and someone is transacting it. With that said, and maybe that's where it's going with Humber, you cannot have 2 people graduate the same course expected to know how to transact a land deal, a development deal, a residential lease, an office lease, an industrial lease, and or sale. Do you see where I'm going with this?
Yeah, but I think if you look at how they're approaching it, it's more about applying the law to the transaction. And I think that that's really where they're headed, is they're focusing on the transaction and making sure that that person, because you're going to join different brokerages. You might join a commercial house. You might join someone. I know someone, over the years, I've met someone who actually does railway corridor kind of stuff. Now, how specialized is that? That doesn't happen in one of our broker offices, like, because not everybody does that. That's very specialized, and you've got to learn how to do this. And the other aspect is, generally speaking, you'd have to have that business acumen. You'd have to know it. But if you're coming out understanding how the law applies to that, then the broker steps in about their particular commodity that they deal in. Maybe it's a residential, commercial, resi-mercial type of an environment, or maybe even more specialized, like offices, or people specialized to be business transactions, or some people are restaurant professionals, or gas stations. But that's a business acumen that you would have to acquire. But as long as you understand how the law applies to the transaction and all the due diligence that needs to take place, then that's up to the professional to be able to temper and actually make that their particular specialty.
Well, thank you, John, and we definitely all look forward in seeing how this new Humber educational format for realtors impacts the industry. I am very hopeful and very optimistic that it is going to generate a higher standard for entry, meaning that you're not going to have as many part-timers join in kind of never getting into becoming a true professional because they just simply can't put in the
I
time.
have to stop you there. You can't say that about part-timers. Part-timers are welcome in our business, according to the Competition Bureau. But I think what you're saying is, if you're going to act like you got to know what you're doing. You have to have knowledge. Don't, you certainly don't want to be out there guessing when you're doing a transaction. And I think that's the intent that Humber's bringing.
Yeah. So just for me to be ultra clear, a ton of our audience are part-time realtors.
Yeah.
And what I will always remind a part-time realtor is that there's nothing wrong with being part-time, but they cannot expect to compete at the highest level because they're not putting in the time required. So I look at it very much from a different perspective, not from the competition or looking down upon. But if I'm going into a listing presentation behind a part-timer, I can tell you that my batting average is probably 1,000. Because how can possibly someone who is somewhere else between 9 to 5 give the same service I can? It's actually impossible.
And that also goes back to that quote where, where the energy, where the focus goes, energy flows, right?
Of course.
And
so I wasn't looking down
upon it. 80-20 all the time, right?
Yeah. So regardless, I just wanted to clear the air because sure. It is a big deal, and yep. I personally don't look down or judge anyone for their decisions. Everybody makes their own bed and does what they do. But I look forward to this process becoming longer and better to, I think, screen a lot of people who will take this industry for what it is, because you're literally touching people's your client is dependent on you. That you need to service them right. So anything that improves education in the marketplace is welcome by me. And thank you for covering that so well, John.
John, that actually touches on, we also updated our mandate, and unfortunately I don't have it in front of me, where, and just so you know, just from TREP's perspective, right, we're very big on professionalism. And I will tell you, the board of directors is very committed to professionalism and making sure that that's put up front in every aspect of our industry. And John, do you happen to have the mandate in front of you there?
I don't, but you're talking about
the one that we just updated recently. Yeah.
Oh yeah. I don't, but I can tell you that we'll
get it for you, Simeon.
Yeah, we will.
Thank you. And I will share it when we do share the podcast in the next few weeks here. I'll make sure that it's downloadable in the comments below. I will definitely share that for you.
Just to put a finer point on this, from TREP's perspective, we are lobbying and advocating for, I think Laura said it best, making it easier to get in and more difficult to get in and easier to get out. Like, we're on the same page. If you're not doing it right, if you're creating problems, I think that Rico and all the others should be standing behind the act and saying you should not be trading. And I think that's part of the problem. I believe that TREB members, a vast majority of TREB members are great at what they do, and they care and they work very hard. It's the few that cause the problems and give us a bad name. So from time to time that gets into the media, and that we really don't need that. So I think there has to be a better structure when people are acting poorly.
Awesome. Well, thank you again to both of you on covering this one well. I do have one last big subject that I wanted to put out today. And I'm gonna be honest.
Simeon, just, if we could just give you a couple of highlights too, because it is December, and John, if you want to, we shared a big announcement recently, and John and the Innovation Task Force is working on something incredible for all of our members. And of course, it's going to be a future facing. So John, if you want to also just provide everybody with the update of Matrix, of course.
Yes, so we're launching, we've launched Matrix, and it will be in people's hands. They can choose. That was part of the mandate, the vision of what a future-facing MLS should look like in tools and services. So as we go through the exercise, and we're getting closer to make some pretty serious announcements that are going to be exciting about what the way we're hopefully ushering a new era with respect to MLS. And I think that some people are saying it's a shift in paradigm, that the vision is different than most situations that we're seeing today in this space. So we're very excited about it, but that should empower our members, and over time, it'll take some time to get right to the end of it, to build it all out. And these are considering things like blockchain and what the future transaction migration of a transaction through the process will look like. And we want to be prepared for it. And just the ability for people to work in one dashboard. These are exciting changes that are coming.
100%. Well, look at the massive difference. Well, I can speak to just the whole reform of forms. I know it's no pun intended, but the whole improvement in technology from a forms perspective. You're able to create profiles, share and edit with and collaborate with your team. So I'm working on a deal right now. It's a $7 million commercial deal, but I have 4 of my agents working on it. One doing research, the other one checking with the city, the other one drafting clauses that are specific to the deal. Everybody can collaborate on one document inside the cloud that at all times, everybody sees the changes live. That's huge.
That's exciting.
We used to have versions, version 1, version 2, version 3, 10, 15, get out of here. Now you can hop in on your computer live. I don't need to ask, send me the latest version. Who has the latest version? The latest version lives on the cloud. It's right there. Click the link, get to work, make the changes, get it to the client via DocuSign, or AuthentiSign, whatever is part of forms. Like, it's just such a cohesive environment. And now with Matrix, for those who don't know, that we're always kind of in only the Toronto Real Estate Board, the rest of Ontario is on Matrix. The collaboration opportunity with other boards is now a monster.
That's only part of it. Like, I mean, there's still so many more components that are going to be coming out, hopefully in 2021. So fingers crossed, but John, we could always speak more on that. And I just also wanted just to touch on one more thing, and that is, you know, we've had so many wonderful things happen in 2020. And one of those wonderful things was the personal real estate corporations.
Of course.
And so if anybody is asking questions, I'm also going to highly suggest like logging on to Stratus. There is a couple of videos that talk more about it and explain in more detail. So I don't know if you've already talked about it on here, Simeon, but we do have those resources, and Treb did put out 2 webinars on it as well.
I have. I actually had last week, I had Tim Hudak come on, and he covered it quite well. I mean, Aurea couldn't have a better leader right now. Tim is a massive friend of the REC, a massive proponent of our industry and everything that it can do. And I was so fortunate. The actual episode premieres tonight at 7 p.m. on the Brokers Playbook page on Facebook. So if you guys want to hop on and take a peek, he just broke it down. A little bit of
background too. So Treb has been involved in this since 2005. So this is actually a joint initiative, right, John?
100%.
Between Treb and Aurea.
Yeah, we actually, our task force came together in 2005 and put it on the table. And we've been trying to usher it along since then. And in this year, we managed to get it back on the table, and with Aurea's help, it happened.
You bet. It's absolutely incredible. Lisa, I'm not letting you off the hook. And if I didn't go into this topic, this wouldn't be Broker's Playbook. It's just saying. Diversity, women in real estate. I mean, I'm on your task force for women in real estate because it's something I strongly believe in. Above and beyond just women's issues, which are significant and many, there's also the universal one of diversity and how people are made to feel. And it's not just real estate. We can only worry about real estate because that's our chosen profession, but the systematic issues in society, racism, religion, all these things that people will always pick on, and colleagues will pick on, and office environments will exist where these things are front and center. I want you, as a Southeast Asian descent, a woman, a Canadian, a leader, a successful entrepreneur. There's many things that you are. Okay, you are all these things that I just spoke of. Where do you want to start? What are you doing to change the world? Just, it doesn't have to go for an hour. Give me your 3-minute hot take on the world in your view today, 2020.
You know, it's funny that you say that, Simeon. When I look back at the year and I say, wow, the universe really picked a year that like touched on many of the things that you touched on and that are all close to my heart. So I've always been driven my entire life, and I know you and I have shared this story where I ran in politics at a young age. I was involved in politics since a young age, and I faced those barriers of because of my ethnicity, because of my race. They looked beyond, and because of my age. So all of those things
Sure.
everything that I did in my drive from my 20s and into my 30s. And so those were all challenges, or if you want to call them a challenge, they were barriers. And also coming back from a background of being part of diversity when it would change from multiculturalism, so educating on people on multiculturalism since high school to the changeover of diversity and educating people on what diversity was to here we are today, and having the opportunity to serve TREB as president. I'm so fortunate that I have a CEO that understands these things. And even my own experience in the industry, and over the course of the last 5 or 6 years, John, would you say that I've always shared things that have taken place or that I've witnessed, and even in organized real estate, because you know there's one side of real estate which is the side where we're all hustling and putting bread on the table, but then there's the back end of real estate. And having been able to serve this industry the last 5, 6 years on the organized real estate side of things, I can tell you it's also a different picture. And I actually remember my first experience with when we were away for a conference with John, and I looked at him and I'm like, oh my gosh, okay, we have 2 issues here. First of all, I'm a minority, number one, and number two, there's way too many egos. So, I mean, those were the first things that stood out to me right away. So to have the backing of TREB on something that, and to have a year where it's something that was buried and not carried fully out the way that it should have been in the 1990s or in the 2000 era, and to see it relinquish out today is an opportunity. And I think here, knowing that TREB stands behind it, I mean, they've always stood behind it, and from the senior levels top down, and just taking this to another level, really.
I too believe that. I too believe that.
And in fact, you know, TREB is also doing massive research. They're investing in things. We're looking at, you know, the stigmas that are out there, what's going on with our own membership, you know, so we're looking at all of those avenues. And, you know, when we talk about barriers, and I should also say, gender is a big barrier too.
100%.
And on both sides, like I think John, you might know the stat better than I would, but even in the real estate industry, right, which was once male dominated, and today what I think we have like 50% women in the industry. And the only part that's missing to this is we want more women leadership. We need to really find a way to connect women and know that there's an opportunity. And I sit back and I look at some of the, you know, the stories that have come out in 2020, not just in the real estate industry, but outside of the industry. And I see this as an opportunity for us to engage with other companies, organizations, and really create more of a global emphasis on diversity, on the whole racial aspect, on women, and encouraging leadership all across. And
I read a really cool article, Lisa.
Yes.
And it was I don't know even know if I could find it. I'll give you the gist of it. Maybe you've run across it. North America, although we think we're progressive, in specific terms, we're not. Meaning that North America still promotes systematic oppression of women in leadership by not really opening up the maternity time. So a woman being pregnant and in fulfilling her life duties, or whatever you want to call procreation, is still penalized in business. Meaning the minute that a woman turns whatever from 25 to 35, that decade where that's the decade I made my bones. That's the decade that most of us from an entrepreneurship or leadership level, that's when you put in the work in order to be able to have something after 35, after 40, after 45.
Right.
If a woman has to stay home, if a woman cannot go back to work because there's stigma that she's not a good mother, then all these social issues and components that are still to this day drilled into women, and I'm talking about just from men, I'm talking from by women to women, by men to women, by society to women. So I think education, and this isn't about just real estate, this is about women leadership.
100%. I agree with you. The education needs to be there. And, like, not to even use this term, but like, if you think about it, if using your example, right, in the eras of the past, there was still the strong women behind those men. And all the way through that were, whether they were carrying the family, whether they were supporting the male, all of those aspects. And so today it's really the focus is where do we take this? And in fact, I spoke to John about this in 2021. We hope to host something where we talk to women within the industry, so past presidents across Ontario, and really talk about what are some of the barriers and how do we uncover these. So we really want to take diversity and we want to take women in real estate to a whole new level. And we want to continue this. This isn't like something like this isn't a government policy where congratulations, well done, here you go. No, this is continuation.
This is life.
The minute that we stop, this is the minute where this gets buried again. And then, 10 years from now, what are we going to say? Okay, well, we thought we dealt with it. No, that's not it. That's not acceptable.
I think what we all have to realize, this is life. This is real life. It's not just about real estate or just about this, that, and the other.
Let me just put in one more thing. So John touched on this. 400,000 immigrants coming into this country. So has anyone paused for a moment? What does that look like? Instead of not just put your business hat on, what does that look like for society? When I think back to the
I think it gives us the opportunity to open our damn eyes.
That's right.
Open our damn eyes.
So if we think about that, many neighborhoods are diverse today. However, does that mean that we all get along? No. Does that mean that we've taken the opportunity to learn about our neighbor or whoever it may be, or even our colleague for that matter? But here is an opportunity. Like if that's the case of what we can expect, that means that we need to find a way to learn to love one another.
If I may add just a couple things. So I see this, there are laws. There's plenty of laws surrounding, let's even talk about home ownership and fair housing and all these things. But what we see where the shift has to happen is in behavior. There has to be
100%.
a reform in behavior, a way to actually say, okay, you got to stop these practices, and if they come to light, then there has to be a harsh response. And that's where we tend to fail as a society, is that we want to shelter certain things, but it's wrong. We need to actually address it head on and say, this can't happen anymore. And that behavior has to stop. And, Lisa touched on it too. I grew up in an interesting world, and it was harsh. And so when you're in when you feel it and you've never experienced it, when you actually feel it, it's a different story. And so I think that that teaches you something, and you accept it better. It's like sports. When you're in sports, nobody sees anything but who the best player is. And everybody, how does it go? I want to be like him, right? And that's what you strive for. And you don't see that. You don't see race. You don't see anything but performance. And I think that's the exciting part, that we need to get to the point where we treat each other.
John,
all
call
the
it
time.
how I would, that you only see the light and love in each person.
Oh, geez.
Uh,
Okay.
my beautiful
Bill.
human beings, I want to thank you so much. We're going on to about just over 45 minutes.
Okay.
With all respect to our audience, you've provided a massive amount of insight and value for Brokers Playbook and for all your brothers and sisters in the industry. Laura did have a hard stop, and I think she got disconnected. She had to run this off her phone. So I'll make sure to thank her in person for her participation
Thank
here
you.
today. Lisa, thank you for being at the helm. Thank you for volunteering. This isn't a play for cash, your presidency in the Toronto Real Estate Board. Thank you for giving all you do for our industry.
And you know, Simeon, to everybody out there as well, like getting to this spot was not easy. And I will tell you, like, that's another conversation for another day, but I will do everything in my power that I can to help support our members.
And that's why I can't thank you enough. I've known you for over a decade. We've been in the trenches of real estate forever together. And every year we've shared many great moments together. So I do thank you for everything you do, because I know you also have a very busy practice. John, again, I know how busy you are, and especially this time of the year with all the planning, and of course having the Treb 100 behind us. I want to just thank you very much for your time. We truly appreciate it.
Thank you very much for having us, Simeon. And really a pleasure. Thank you again.
To the Brokers Playbook audience, thank you all for watching. For any comments, concerns, you need to reach out to Lisa or John. By all means, send an email to community@brokersplaybook.com. That is community@brokersplaybook.com, or you can DM us in the Facebook page. Until next time, Simeon.